Threads play a major role in sewing project success. While they look simple from the first glance, sewing threads are actually packed with different characteristics, and understanding those features will help you pick the right thread for your project. Today I want to share 5 tips that will change how you look at sewing threads. This video is created in partnership with Mettler, manufacturer of high-quality threads. All these tips are backed by true industry experts. Let's start with the first tip, and the tip that helped me understand threads better is to look at the thread construction. Usually when we talk about sewing threads, we are talking about the material or fiber that they are made of and the thickness of the thread. But the construction of the thread is actually what defines lots of characteristics of the thread and its performance. Now, the first construction of the threads is spun thread. This is where natural fibers such as cotton threads are. With this type of sewing thread, the single yarns consist of short, cut staple fibers twisted together to form a thread. In the picture, you can see how the thread is constructed, and because of that construction, cotton threads have that very matte, kinda hairy texture. Because of the construction, spun threads do not have very strong tensile strength or abrasion resistance. Tensile strength is described as maximum tension that can be absorbed by a thread until breakage. Abrasion resistance is how much rubbing thread can absorb until breakage. The second construction of the thread is coarse spun thread, and this is where most of polyester all-purpose threads are. With coarse spun threads, the single yarn consists of continuous filament core surrounded by fine fibers. Because of the filament, these type of threads have better tensile strength and abrasion resistance than spun threads. From the outside, they are a little bit similar to spun threads, and they also have matte, hairy texture. Thread can also be constructed from continuous filament. The single yarns are made of endless fibers, also known as filaments, for continuous filament threads. Because of the filament, these threads are very strong and also very smooth, giving thread shine. Because of these features, usually embroidery threads are made from continuous filament so that you can create shiny, glossy embroidery. This type of construction also allows to create threads like Ceraflex, which is highly elastic thread. From spun threads, coarse spun threads, and continuous filament threads, continuous filament threads have the best abrasion resistance and tensile strength. Sometimes you might run across into wrapped yarn. Because of this construction, this is usually a decorative thread that has metallic effect. Because of the wrapped construction, these threads are a bit difficult to sew, and to sew with this kind of thread, you need to use a special needle with longer eye so that the thread is able to penetrate the fabric without breakage. Different thread constructions will give you different seam effect, different abrasion resistance, different tensile strength. And knowing these different constructions and their benefits will allow you to make the best choice for your project. Moving on to tip number 2 is know about thread elongation. Sometimes when you're working with fabric that has elasticity, you want to pair it with thread that also has elasticity. Thread elasticity is described as elongation, and elongation is usually expressed in percentage at break. To put it simply, elongation is change in length until breakage caused by tension. Different threads have different elongation, and now let's do a little experiment. Let's sew one straight seam using polyester all-purpose thread. Using the same machine settings, using the same fabric, let's make another seam using straight stitch, but this time let's use elastic thread, Ceraflex. Now let's start to pull the fabric. At a certain point, a seam made with polyester all-purpose thread starts to break, while the seam made with elastic thread, Ceraflex, remain intact. And this is because an elastic thread like Ceraflex has an elongation of about 65%, which is much more compared to standard polyester all-purpose thread. You won't need elasticity in every sewing project, but if you're working with fabric that does have elasticity, maybe it has a little bit of elastane, and you want to keep that elasticity and flexibility, knowing about thread elongation will allow you to make a right choice of thread. In tip number 3, let's answer the question which thread, cotton or polyester all-purpose, is better. Cotton is of course a natural fiber, while polyester is a chemical fiber. From the first tip about construction of the thread, we already know that polyester all-purpose thread is a coarse spun thread which has better abrasion resistance and better tensile strength compared to spun thread, which is cotton threads. Cotton threads have better dyeing ability, while polyester all-purpose threads keep their original color way longer and have better resistance to sunlight effect. Cotton threads also have a much higher melting point than polyester all-purpose threads. Also, polyester all-purpose threads have better chemical resistance compared to cotton threads. Abrasion resistance for polyester all-purpose thread is about 3 times higher than the cotton thread. So let's say that you're choosing a thread for your seam which will absorb lots of abrasion. Let's say you're working on a pair of jeans and it will endure lots of rubbing through sitting. In this case, if you're choosing polyester all-purpose thread, it will have a much higher abrasion resistance and thus create a much longer lasting seam. Another point that is often discussed when talking about cotton and polyester all-purpose threads is sustainability. Now, because cotton is a natural fiber while polyester is a chemical fiber, usually it is considered that cotton threads are more environmentally friendly. However, this may not always be true. To produce cotton, manufacturers need to use lots of water. On the other hand, we have thread manufacturers like Mettler who use sustainable processes in manufacturing their threads, making polyester all-purpose threads more environmentally friendly solution. And of course, if you're looking for the best choice in environmentally friendly thread, you might consider a thread made from recycled PET bottles, where both the thread and the spool are made from recycled materials. From sewing perspective, recycled thread Ceracycle has same qualities as polyester all-purpose threads, the main difference being that Ceracycle is made entirely from recycled PET bottles, making it a very good choice for sustainable projects. Tip number 4 is very closely connected to cotton and polyester all-purpose threads. Sometimes you have lots of threads in your sewing collection and you may not always know if the thread that you have is polyester or cotton. There's a very simple test that you can make and find out which thread you actually have. Please note that this test can only be performed in a very controlled environment. Take a little strand of your thread. Using tweezers, hold the thread above the flame-resistant surface. Now ignite the thread. If you have a polyester thread, it will burn quickly and melt. It will create a sizzling flame and black smoke. The smell will be very distinctive plastic smell, and it will leave black melting residue. Now let's do the same experiment with a different thread. If it burns quickly, creating a very quiet flame and white or no smoke, most likely you have a cotton thread, and it will create a smell of a paper, leaving white or gray ashes. So this is a very quick test how you can determine which type of thread you have in your stash. However, again a reminder, be very careful when performing this test at home. Fifth and final tip I wanted to share today is about all threads. If you're lucky, someone will gift you a lot of different threads. You may find a great stash of threads at your local thrift store, or you might come across on great thread sale and you might want to stock up on thread and great prices. So here what you need to remember is polyester all-purpose thread do not age, while cotton threads over time lose their properties. So you can have lots of polyester all-purpose threads for many years and they will always be as good as new. And sometimes when you take old cotton thread, use it on your sewing machine and your sewing machine all of a sudden starts to act up, this is a sign that the thread is already old and should not be used in the sewing process. Additionally, when you're storing your threads, just make sure that they're not exposed to direct sunlight for extended periods of time. This may damage the color of the cotton threads and again damage their properties throughout time. These are all 5 tips I wanted to share today about sewing threads. Hopefully these tips will allow you to understand sewing threads better because they definitely help me. Thank you for watching today's video and I will see you next time. Bye!